The storm came without warning, a roaring wall of wind and ash sweeping through the blackened valley like a beast with no face, its icy breath cutting through the dark night. The Terran scout outpost sat buried against the jagged cliffs of an alien world, far from the lights of any human colony, and even farther from safety. Inside his tent, the soldier adjusted the last seal on the heating unit, listening to the storm tear across the plains. He was used to cold. He'd served on ice worlds, in deserts, in the endless dark between the stars. But this was different. This cold felt alive, like something was crawling on the wind. A faint movement outside made his hand freeze near the heater. He reached for the sidearm at his belt. It wasn't the sound of the storm. It was something else. A shadow stumbled through the snow outside, thin and shaking. When he unzipped the flap, a figure collapsed into the light. An alien girl, small, pale, with silver-tinted skin and glowing eyes that flickered weakly in the heat. She looked terrified, soaked in frost and shivering, clutching at her arms like someone who'd run from something far worse than a storm. He caught her before she hit the floor, feeling how cold her body was, colder than anything human could survive. Her breathing was shallow, almost broken, but her eyes stayed open, locked on his face as if memorizing it. She whispered something in a language he didn't understand, but fear is universal, and it was carved into every line of her face. For a second, he hesitated. She wasn't supposed to be here. This world had been declared uninhabited when the Terran fleet arrived 2 months ago. But then again, uninhabited was a word the Galactic Council had used many times before to cover their secrets. He pulled her inside and sealed the flap behind them, cutting the storm out. The warmth hit her immediately, steam rising from her clothes. She curled into the corner near the heater like a wounded animal, trembling but alive. The soldier poured a ration of hot water into a canteen lid and slid it toward her. She stared at it suspiciously for a moment before taking it in both hands, her fingers shaking too hard to hold it steady. He said nothing. Years of war had taught him that words didn't mean much at the edge of the galaxy. Actions did. He checked his scanner. No hostiles in range, no signals either. But that didn't calm the unease crawling up his spine. No one survived this storm alone. If she'd made it to his camp, it meant something had gone wrong somewhere else. And whatever it was, it might still be out there. She flinched when he moved closer, then froze when he offered her his thermal blanket. For a moment, her glowing eyes softened. She reached out slowly, wrapping herself in the heavy fabric. He could hear the storm pounding outside like 1,000 fists against the tent walls. She whispered again, slower this time. Her language wasn't Terran, but he recognized the structure. Council dialect. She was one of them, one of the species that stood in the Great Hall of the Council while humanity fought their wars on the edges of space. Her kind had looked at humans with polite smiles and sharp teeth, calling them wild, unpredictable, dangerous. And now here she was, shivering in his tent. Hours passed like slow-burning coals. The storm raged without mercy, trapping them together. She fell asleep first, curled near the heater, her breathing finally steady. He didn't sleep. He watched the scanner, checked his rifle, and stared at the tent flap as if waiting for something to tear through it. Then he heard it. Not wind. Not snow. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, close. He shut off the heater, plunging the tent into near darkness. The girl stirred, her glowing eyes snapping open, and for the first time he saw what lived beneath her fear. Not weakness. Knowledge. She reached out and gripped his wrist with a strength that startled him. "They are here," she whispered in broken Terran. That was all he needed. He moved silently to the entrance, pulling the flap open just enough to see. The storm had thinned. Shadows moved between the snow drifts, tall, thin, cloaked in something that shimmered against the light. He recognized the movement instantly. Not predators. Hunters. Alien strike teams. Not Dominion. Worse. Black Flag mercenaries, unofficial hands of the Council, used to clean up the things they didn't want the galaxy to see. If they were here, she wasn't just a refugee. She was a target. And he had just invited her into his tent. She crawled closer to him, whispering something fast and desperate in her language, pointing at the snow. He didn't need a translator to understand. They had followed her here. He clenched his jaw, flicking off the safety on his rifle. He'd fought these things before. He knew how they worked. They wouldn't attack like an army. They'd strike like wolves, silent, fast, no mercy. But this wasn't his first night in the cold. He dragged a crate against the tent's outer wall and began setting silent proximity charges in the snow. "You should have run farther," he muttered. She shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered, her voice shaking but clear. "They would have found me anywhere. They fear you." The first explosion cut through the storm like a thunderclap. One of the hunters had tripped a mine. The others moved fast after that, their black cloaks slicing through the white. The soldier stepped into the blizzard like a ghost, rifle up, sight steady. His shots were silent, Terran rounds built to pierce through shield armor. The first merc went down in the snow with a hole clean through his chest. Another tried to flank, but the soldier was already moving, always one step ahead, the way only someone born on a deathworld could be. Inside the tent, the girl huddled low, watching through the open flap. She'd heard stories about Terrans, about their brutality in war, about the way they moved like predators unleashed. She thought they were exaggerations. Now, watching this single human dismantle trained hunters in a storm meant to kill, she realized the stories hadn't been exaggerated at all. If anything, they'd been too soft. The fight was quick and brutal. When the last merc hit the snow, silence returned, broken only by the wind. The soldier stood still for a long moment, rifle lowered, scanning the horizon. The girl crawled out slowly, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She looked at the bodies, at the blood staining the snow black. Her voice shook when she finally spoke. "They were Council," she said quietly. "Not mercenaries. The Council sent them." His jaw tightened. That explained everything. They went back into the tent as the storm began to ease. He leaned his rifle against the wall and sat on the ground across from her. She didn't shrink from him anymore. She looked at him like someone who'd just realized they were sitting beside a weapon that didn't belong in the hands of anyone else. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why would the Council send hunters after you?" Her throat tightened, and for the first time since she arrived, he saw more than fear in her eyes. He saw defiance. "Because I saw what I wasn't supposed to see," she said. "And because I went to the only people they can't control." He stared at her for a long, quiet moment. Humanity had always known the Council didn't tell the whole truth. They'd been kept at the edges of power, useful enough to be tolerated, too dangerous to be trusted. But now, something deeper was moving in the shadows. And whatever secret this girl carried, it was big enough for the Council to kill for. "Then you're stuck with me," he said finally. She blinked, surprised. "Why help me?" she asked softly. His answer was simple. "Because the Council's been trying to leash us for a long time. Maybe it's time we bite back." Outside, the last of the storm died, revealing the alien stars above. But something much bigger than the storm was coming. The Council wouldn't stop with one team. They would send more. They always did. But tonight, for the first time, the hunter had become the hunted. And as the wind carried away the tracks in the snow, the soldier stared into the darkness, already planning for war. If you enjoyed this HFY sci-fi story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful human stories, because this is just the beginning. Humanity always rises. HFY forever. The storm was still groaning against the tent walls when the first faint cracks of movement came from the distance, soft at first, almost drowned beneath the wind, but the soldier's ear had been trained for this kind of silence. He'd spent years on worlds just like this, frozen wastelands where the cold killed the weak and the shadows carried more danger than the night. He moved slowly, careful not to make noise, his breath steady, his hand hovering over the rifle resting by his side. The alien girl stirred beneath the thermal blanket, her breathing quick but shallow. She wasn't sleeping anymore, not after what she had whispered hours earlier. She'd known they would come. He could see it in the way her hands gripped the edge of the fabric, as if even warmth wasn't enough to keep out the fear. The scanner on his wrist began to blink in soft red pulses. One, then two, then 5 contacts, just outside the perimeter. They moved in a fan shape, disciplined, hunting with the precision of trained killers. This wasn't a random patrol. This was a strike team, and it wasn't their first kill. He switched off the heater entirely, plunging the tent into darkness, leaving only the faint blue glow from the scanner lighting his jawline. "They are here," he whispered, voice low enough to disappear into the wind. Her eyes opened fully now, glowing faintly in the dark, and he saw something flash in them, not just fear, but recognition. He zipped the flap halfway, crouching low, watching the storm as faint black shapes emerged in the swirling snow. The wind seemed to bend around them, their outlines rippling like shadows that didn't belong to this world. He counted them, 5, all moving with silent coordination, weapons cradled close to their bodies. He recognized the design. Not Dominion soldiers. Not raiders. These were Council Blackline hunters, the kind of strike force they used when they didn't want their fingerprints on anything. They were ghosts, trained to make people disappear quietly. Their presence here meant one thing. This girl wasn't just some runaway. She was a threat. She crawled closer to him, her voice barely a breath. "If they catch me, they'll kill you too," she whispered, trembling not from the cold but from certainty. "They don't take prisoners." He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the shadows, hands already moving through muscle memory, sliding a spare magazine into the side pouch, priming the silent proximity mines he'd placed hours ago. He had been a scout, a soldier, a survivor, and he knew this terrain better than they did. He had no reinforcements, no backup, but he didn't need it. The first hunter reached the edge of the perimeter, his boots crunching softly in the snow. A heartbeat later, the ground beneath him flared white, and the proximity charge went off without a sound. Just a brief flash and the dull thud of a body dropping into the drifts. The others froze, their cloaks rippling like smoke in the wind. The commander of the squad barked a clipped order in council tongue, sharp and low, and they began to spread wider. They were good. But he was better. The soldier slipped out of the tent like a shadow breaking away from another. The girl tried to grab his arm, whispering, "Don't go." But his eyes met hers with that calm, unshakable steadiness that humans carried like a blade. "If I don't," he said quietly, "we both die in here." Then he was gone. The storm worked in his favor. He moved with the snow, keeping low, boots silent against the ice. The hunters didn't see him at first. They were scanning for something bigger, something loud. They had no idea that the thing hunting them was already behind them. He raised the rifle, slow and controlled, lined up the glowing sight on the nearest figure, and squeezed. One shot. One drop. The hunter folded into the snow without a sound, his weapon slipping from his hand like a dead bird. The others spun around instantly, but the wind covered his movement as he shifted to the side. A second shot. Then a third. Each as calm as a heartbeat. The girl inside the tent covered her mouth, trying not to make a sound. She could hear it all, the thud of bodies, the soft whisper of Terran steel, the kind of controlled violence her people had always feared. The Council's propaganda called humans volatile and reckless, but as she watched his shadow move through the snow like a ghost, she realized that was a lie. There was nothing reckless about this man. He was precise, efficient, and that made him far more terrifying. The last 2 hunters regrouped near a ridge, their cloaks flaring as they activated low-visibility fields, trying to fade into the storm. But they had made a mistake. They thought the human was the prey. He waited. He listened. The storm carried everything to him, the crunch of boots, the faint scrape of metal against armor, the almost silent exhale of a breath. His rifle came up before they even knew he was there. 2 rounds. 2 flashes. 2 bodies falling into the snow like they'd been swallowed by the dark. Silence returned almost instantly. He exhaled slowly, lowering the rifle. His movements were so controlled it almost didn't look human at all. That was the thing about Terrans. They weren't the strongest species in the galaxy, or the fastest, or the most advanced. But they had learned to fight in every condition, against every monster, and they always adapted. That was why the Council feared them. Not because of their technology. Because of their will. The soldier returned to the tent silently, brushing the frost from his jacket. The girl looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Not as a man, not as a soldier, but as something far more dangerous than anything the council could build. Her voice was a whisper. You killed them all. He didn't answer. He just knelt, cleaned the frost from his rifle, and reset the heater. The warmth returned slowly, chasing the cold out of the small space. She stared at the floor, her breath uneven. You don't understand what they'll do now, she said finally. They'll send more. They'll burn everything around you to get to me. He looked up at her, and for a heartbeat, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Determination. Then they'll have to bleed for it, he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of voice that made people believe him, whether they wanted to or not. Outside, the storm began to ease, leaving behind a quiet that didn't feel like safety. He dragged the hunters' bodies to the ridge, stripped them of their equipment, and covered their tracks with snow. No traces. No signals. Let the council send more. They'd find nothing but silence. When he returned, the girl was staring at the faint glow of the heater like it was the only thing keeping the universe away. She looked up at him, her voice soft but trembling with something close to guilt. You don't even know what I've done, she said. Why they're after me? He sat down opposite her, his rifle leaning against the wall like a trusted friend. Doesn't matter, he said. They came for you. Now they've got me too. She shook her head, her silver hair catching the firelight. You're making a mistake, she whispered. The council isn't afraid of anything. But they're afraid of me. He studied her for a long moment, her glowing eyes flickering like dying stars. Then that makes two of us, he said quietly, because they've been afraid of us for a long time. The wind outside finally stilled. The night was deep, quiet, and dangerous. And though the battle was over, they both knew this was just the beginning. The council wouldn't stop. The next team would be larger, smarter. But now it wouldn't just be her running alone in the cold. It would be the two of them. And behind him, whether the galaxy liked it or not, stood humanity. The storm had ended, but the war had just stepped out of the shadows. The wind outside had died to a soft, hollow moan, the kind of silence that never meant safety. The tent glowed faintly from the heater's soft pulse, but neither of them felt warmth. The girl sat curled in the corner, the heavy Terran blanket wrapped tight around her trembling shoulders, her glowing eyes darting toward the flap every few seconds. The soldier sat on the opposite side of the tent, cross-legged, rifle resting against his knee, eyes fixed on the scanner on his wrist. The red pings were gone, but he knew better than to trust an empty screen. The council's hunters didn't stop after one squad failed. They doubled down. Always. This was only the calm between storms. He kept replaying the ambush in his head. How they moved, how they tracked her through the storm. Council Blackline operatives didn't just stumble across a target. They were precision weapons. Which meant the council wasn't just trying to silence her. They wanted to erase her. That alone told him she wasn't just some runaway alien girl. She was something else. Something dangerous enough to make them cross into Terran patrol zones in the middle of a planetary storm. She finally spoke, her voice low and unsteady, like someone forcing each word through a wall of fear. You should have let them take me, she whispered. They'll come back. They'll bring more. He didn't look up from the scanner. Then they'll find I'm still here, he said quietly. And they'll wish they hadn't. She stared at him, startled not by the words, but by how calm they were. No bravado. No shouting. Just quiet certainty. She'd seen humans in council propaganda feeds before. Violent. Impulsive. Reckless. But this wasn't that. This was something colder. More deliberate. And that terrified her more than any hunter. He adjusted the heater, letting the warm air push away some of the frost creeping in from the edges of the tent. You want to tell me why they're after you? He asked finally, voice low, even. She hesitated, eyes dropping to the snow-stained floor. Her fingers dug into the blanket. I shouldn't, she whispered. If I do, you'll die with me. He leaned back, folding his arms. You're already here. They've already tried. I've already killed their squad. If I'm marked, might as well know why. She looked up slowly. The soft light caught her face in a way that made her look fragile, but there was something behind her eyes that wasn't weak. It was guilt. I worked for them, she said quietly. For the council. I was part of the observation corps. We watch everything your people do. Every ship that leaves your colonies. Every weapon your fleets build. Every star system you step into. We study humans because, she faltered, breath catching like a blade on a stone. Because they're afraid of you. The soldier's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. She went on, her voice gaining a sharp edge as the words finally forced their way out. They've feared you since first contact. They call you unstable, unpredictable. But that's not why. They fear you because you change things. Every world you touch stops obeying the council. Every ally they have starts asking questions. You don't follow their rules. You don't kneel. They can control every other species, but not you. So they decided to control everything around you. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes steady on her. And where do you fit into that? She swallowed hard, looking away. I wasn't supposed to care. I was supposed to record. Send reports. Nothing more. But then I saw what they were planning. I saw what they're building. Her breath quickened, her hands gripping the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. They're going to attack Earth, she whispered. Not with fleets. With something worse. The soldier didn't move. He'd fought too many wars to react with panic. Instead, his voice got lower, steadier, the way it always did when the world tilted toward blood. What kind of something? They call it the Silence Protocol, she said, her voice shaking now. It's not a weapon. It's a plan. They're going to isolate your home world completely. No comms. No supply lines. No allies. They're going to cut Earth off from every star, surround it with fleets, and let it bleed slowly. Not a war. A cage. For a long moment, the only sound in the tent was the soft hum of the heater. His mind moved through the implications like a machine. Council fleets blockading jump routes, stations isolated, colonies starving. It wouldn't be the first time the galaxy had tried to crush humanity. But if they thought Earth would kneel, they were still making the same mistake. Why tell me? He asked finally. Why run to us? Her glowing eyes flicked to his, sharp and desperate. Because I couldn't let them do it, she said. Because I know what happens when they decide someone doesn't belong in their council. My people were next after yours. We all saw it. But no one spoke. I did. And that's why they want me dead. The soldier exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling in his chest like ice. Humanity had always known the council feared them, but they hadn't known the shape of the blade waiting in the dark. And now, that blade was aimed straight at home. She shifted closer without realizing it, her hands shaking as she clutched the edge of the blanket. You should leave me here, she whispered. You're a soldier. You have a life. If you stay with me, the council will hunt you across every star. He reached over slowly, grabbed the edge of the tent flap, and pulled it open. The sky outside was a vast sea of alien stars, hard and cold. He'd fought too long and too far to let fear decide his path. They've been hunting us since the day we left Earth, he said. This doesn't change anything. What changes now is that we finally know where to aim. She stared at him like she wasn't sure if she should be terrified or relieved. In that moment, he saw the shift, the way fear turned into something else, something sharper. Trust. He knelt by his pack, pulling out a transmitter the size of his fist. Its green light flickered to life as he keyed in an encrypted signal. It wasn't a distress call. It was a rally beacon, a code Terran forces used when a single soldier found something too dangerous to ignore. He spoke into it softly, his words clear, steady, like steel. Echo to command. Package recovered. Council's playing a different game. Requesting black transport. Shadow protocol. A faint crackle of static answered him, followed by a single voice. Copy. Echo. Stay alive. Wolves inbound. She frowned. Wolves. He zipped up his jacket, slinging the rifle over his shoulder, his lips curling in the faintest hint of a smile. They'll send soldiers, he said. But not just any soldiers. The kind the council fears more than anything else. Outside, the night had gone quiet in a way that made the stars seem too close. The storm had buried the bodies of the first hunter team, but he knew others were already coming. They always did. But this time, they weren't alone. Humanity was coming too. The girl sat a little straighter now, watching him pack without trembling. She didn't say it out loud, but she understood something she never had before: why the council feared his kind. Not because they were the strongest. Not because they had the biggest fleet. But because when they were hunted, they didn't run. They gathered. He glanced back at her once before stepping outside into the freezing night. Get some rest, he said quietly. You're not alone anymore. She stared at the flap long after he disappeared into the snow, her heart pounding not with fear, but with something new. The storm had passed, but the war that waited in the stars had only just begun. And this time, the galaxy wasn't hunting prey. It had woken the wolf pack. The stars were sharp and cold when he stepped out of the tent, each one glittering like the eye of something watching from the dark. The storm had finally died, leaving a blanket of untouched snow across the ridges, soft and clean, hiding the blood beneath it like the world itself was trying to forget what had happened. But he didn't forget. No Terran soldier ever forgot. The soldier crouched near the edge of the perimeter, scanning the horizon through the scope of his rifle. Every breath turned to mist in front of him, each movement slow and deliberate. There was no wind now, no noise, just the kind of silence that only existed when something dangerous was waiting. The faint crackle of the transmitter on his belt broke that silence. A voice came through, low and firm, coded and calm. Echo, this is Iron Hound Actual. Signal received. Shadow Wolves en route. ETA, 45 minutes. Stay dark. Don't light the fire too high. He pressed the transmit key with a gloved hand. Copy, Iron Hound. Perimeters clean for now. Council hunters already sent the first wave. They won't be the last. A short burst of static was their only reply before the line went quiet. He lowered the scope and swept his gaze across the valley. It was hard to imagine anyone would want this frozen rock, but humanity had learned long ago that the most dangerous places were rarely chosen for comfort. The council picked this kind of terrain for one reason: isolation. No civilians. No questions. No witnesses. That meant the girl wasn't just carrying a secret. They wanted her erased. Clean. Quiet. He turned his eyes back toward the tent. She was still inside, curled under the blanket like a wounded creature trying to make itself smaller than the world. But something about her had changed after she told him what she knew. She wasn't just a frightened fugitive anymore. She was a fuse, and the council had no idea what it had just lit. He walked back slowly, boots sinking deep into the snow, his senses alert for the faintest ripple of movement. When he unzipped the flap, her glowing eyes snapped toward him, her muscles tense until she recognized him. She hadn't slept. Of course she hadn't. He sat down across from her again, reaching for a ration pack, tearing it open without a word. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was something else, a shared understanding of the storm about to fall on them. They'll send more, she said softly. Her voice was steadier now, but underneath it was a tremor that came from knowing exactly what the council was capable of. He nodded once, slowly. I'm counting on it, he said. She tilted her head slightly, confusion flickering across her face. You want them to come? He met her eyes with the same cold steadiness he'd carried all night. I want them to keep underestimating us. It's what they've always done. It's why we win. She stared at him for a moment longer, then lowered her gaze. They don't underestimate you, she whispered. They fear you. That's why they want Earth in a cage. The soldier leaned back, his voice low. They've been trying to cage us since the first day we stepped off our planet. They just picked the wrong world to test their leash on. The heater hummed softly between them, its warmth carving a small pocket of human comfort against a galaxy that had none. She reached out toward it with trembling fingers. "When I was younger," she said quietly, "they told us stories about your people. They said humans were dangerous because they were unpredictable. That you don't follow orders. That you don't kneel to anyone." She looked up again, her silver hair catching the glow. "I thought they were exaggerating. I thought they wanted us to be afraid of you." He didn't smile, but something in his expression shifted. "They were right," he said simply. "We don't kneel. Not to beasts. Not to kings. And sure as hell not to the council." The sound came then, a faint, rhythmic thump against the air. At first it was so soft she didn't notice, but his head snapped toward the north instantly. He knew that sound. It wasn't the storm. It wasn't hunters. It was engines. Terran engines. Within minutes, the night sky above the ridge shimmered with dark shapes sliding through the upper atmosphere. They moved without lights, their hulls matte black, vanishing against the stars with every pass. To anyone else, they would have been invisible. But to him, it was like watching wolves run through snow. "They are here," he said quietly. She pushed herself up, clutching the blanket around her shoulders as she stepped toward the tent flap. When she looked up at the sky, she froze. She had seen council fleets her whole life, polished, bright, loud. Terran ships were different. Predators, not parades. Sleek and quiet, every inch of their design meant for striking fast and disappearing before the enemy even realized they were surrounded. 3 dropships broke formation, gliding down without a sound. No running lights, no flare of thrusters. When their landing struts kissed the snow, it was like a whisper. The soldier zipped the tent flap and stood in front of her, his presence suddenly sharper, more commanding. "When they come in," he said calmly, "don't speak. Don't move unless I tell you. They're not here to hurt you. But they don't trust easily. They can smell council tricks from a mile away." Her throat tightened as the ramp of the lead dropship hissed open. A column of Terran soldiers stepped out into the snow, their black armor slick with frost, their visors reflecting the starlight. They didn't look like the polished honor guards of the council. They moved like a single organism, silent and perfectly in sync, rifles held low but ready. Wolves. That was what he'd called them. And she understood now why the council whispered that word with fear. The leader approached first, a tall woman in full combat gear, her helmet pulled back to reveal steel-gray hair and cold, clear eyes that had seen too many wars. She glanced once at the girl, then back at the soldier. "Echo," she said simply. He gave a short nod. "Wolves," he replied. "We've got company coming. Council Blackline. She's the reason." The commander didn't ask pointless questions. She looked the alien girl up and down once, assessing her not like a child, but like a problem that needed solving. "What's the payload?" she asked. He held her gaze. "She's carrying council secrets. Something big. Something they're willing to burn the snow for." That made the commander's jaw tighten. "Then we move now," she said. She gestured to her unit, and the wolves fanned out, laying down sensor spikes and dropping portable barricades in the snow. They weren't here to run. They were here to make a statement. The girl clutched the blanket tighter around her. She'd spent her entire life watching council soldiers, but these humans were different. Their movements were quiet, but every step carried a weight she'd never seen before. They didn't look like people who followed orders. They looked like people who wrote their own. The commander turned to her, eyes sharp. "If the council sent Blackline," she said flatly, "they're not going to stop. They'll throw everything at us until you're gone or dead. Which means now you belong to us. And we don't lose what's ours." The girl felt something stir in her chest, a strange, unfamiliar feeling. Safety. It was strange to feel safe standing next to the most feared species in the galaxy. But there it was. The soldier adjusted his gear and glanced north, his voice low, steady. "They're coming," he said. "And this time, they'll learn what happens when you hunt a Terran and don't finish the job." Above them, the stars seemed to hold their breath as the wolves prepared the kill zone. And in the middle of that frozen night, the galaxy shifted. The council thought they were hunting one soldier and one alien girl. They were wrong. They had woken the pack. The night had turned cold and still, the kind of silence that carried weight, like the world itself was holding its breath. Around the tent, the snow lay smooth and untouched except for the black shapes of Terran dropships settled like great metal predators on the frost. Their hulls absorbed the starlight, black on black, making them almost disappear if not for the faint pulse of their engines. The wolves had set up a perimeter fast. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Sensor spikes stood in a wide circle around the camp, buried just enough to be invisible but ready to scream warnings if a single molecule of air shifted wrong. The soldier stood just inside the inner perimeter, his rifle resting loosely against his shoulder, his expression calm. He'd fought too many battles to confuse quiet with safety. This was the kind of quiet that came before someone bled. The alien girl stood near the heater, wrapped in the heavy Terran blanket like it was the last barrier between her and the frozen dark. She kept stealing glances at the wolves, those silent, black-armored soldiers who moved like one creature. Everything about them unsettled her. Council forces talked loudly, marched in formation, announced their power to make others fear them. Terrans didn't need to. Their silence said everything. It wasn't performance. It was a promise. The commander of the wolves, the tall woman with steel-gray hair, crouched over a glowing portable holomap in the snow. The map showed moving red dots, council drop signatures far to the east, advancing with military precision. She didn't speak loudly. Her voice carried a low, controlled authority that made everyone around her move sharper. "They're deploying strike wings, probably multiple squads," she said, tracing a gloved finger through the map. "Patton's classic blackline. They'll hit us fast and hard from three sides, close the gap before dawn." Her eyes flicked toward the soldier. "They're not underestimating us this time." He knelt beside her, scanning the map. "They're still underestimating us," he said quietly. "They think we're defending." The commander's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Then let's make them regret the mistake." A low ripple of laughter passed through the wolves, not loud, not mocking, but the kind of quiet, dark sound that belonged to people who had survived too many wars to be afraid anymore. The girl shivered, not from the cold, but from the way these humans welcomed the idea of being hunted. She whispered, "You can't fight the council. They'll send more. And more." The commander glanced at her, eyes sharp as a blade. "Then they'll run out of hunters," she said simply. The soldier walked to the edge of the perimeter, his boots crunching softly in the snow. The ridges around them loomed like the bones of a dead world, shadows swallowing the light. Out there, somewhere beyond the horizon, the council's strike teams were already moving. He could feel it in the stillness, in the way the wind shifted. Predators could always feel other predators approaching. He raised the scope to his eye and scanned the horizon. Nothing yet. But it was coming. Inside the perimeter, the wolves moved like ghosts, setting mines beneath the snow, building kill zones, adjusting fields of fire. There was no shouting, no speeches, no bravado. Each soldier knew exactly what to do, their movements drilled into their bones. They weren't just soldiers. They were hunters born of a species that had spent millennia fighting to stay alive on a death world. The council never understood that part. They thought humanity was dangerous because of its weapons. They were wrong. It was because of their will. The girl stepped out of the tent slowly, her silver hair glinting faintly in the light of the dropships. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, unsure if she belonged in the middle of these humans or at the edge. The commander noticed her and didn't bother softening her tone. "You're the reason they're coming. Stay close. Don't make a sound. If you see them before we do, say it fast." The girl's throat tightened. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Why fight for me? I'm not one of you." The soldier turned from the ridge, his breath a pale mist against the cold. "Because the council's been hunting us for a long time," he said, "and this time they brought the fight to us. That makes you our problem now. And we don't lose what's ours." A distant sound cut across the stillness then, a faint, rising hum. It started low, almost like the whisper of wind, then grew sharper, more defined. The commander straightened. The wolves froze. The soldier raised his scope again. Against the horizon, black shapes began to move. Sleek council dropships cutting through the night, their hulls faintly glowing with their shield lines. He lowered the scope and exhaled slowly. "Showtime," he said quietly. The commander gave one signal, a flick of her wrist, and the wolves melted into the snow. They became part of the terrain, shadows among shadows. To the naked eye, they were gone. The girl clutched the blanket tighter, pressing herself against the side of the tent, her heartbeat loud in her ears. The soldier crouched next to a half-buried boulder, his rifle steady, scope glowing faint green. The first council squad hit the perimeter without even realizing it. Mines buried in the snow flared white in the darkness. The explosion was sharp, clean, like the sky itself had cracked. 3 black-cloaked hunters vanished in an instant. Before the others could react, Terran rifles opened up from 3 angles, their shots precise and silent. Council soldiers dropped one after another before their feet even touched the snow inside the kill zone. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She had seen battles before, but never like this. The council fought like an empire. Large, loud, overwhelming. Terrans fought like predators. Quiet, coordinated, lethal. Not a single human shouted. No one needed orders. Every move was a rhythm carved from 1,000 battles fought on 1,000 hostile worlds. More council dropships screamed overhead. Their forces were bigger now, heavier, determined to crush resistance before it could spread. But the wolves didn't retreat. They surged forward. The soldier vaulted the boulder, boots cutting clean lines through the snow as he advanced, rifle swinging smoothly from target to target. A flash of plasma barely missed his head, burning the air beside him. He didn't flinch. He dove, rolled, and came up firing. One hunter went down. Then another. The commander barked a single word, "Shift," and the entire Terran line moved as if it shared one heartbeat. They didn't hold a position. They broke the council's rhythm, scattering their formation like birds slammed into a storm. The girl could only watch, frozen at the edge, as a single squad of humans shredded a strike force meant to kill dozens. One of the hunters broke through the perimeter, sprinting toward the tent with a blade that shimmered in the dark. The girl stumbled back, heart pounding. Before the alien could reach her, the soldier was already moving, fast as the wind. His hand shot forward, catching the hunter's wrist midswing, and in one fluid motion, he slammed him into the snow and drove his knife into the soft plate of the hunter's armor. No hesitation. No mercy. He rose slowly, blood steaming in the cold, eyes locked on the next wave of council soldiers moving across the ridge. They weren't backing down. Good. Neither was he. The girl stared at him, her breath coming in short gasps. "Why don't you run?" she whispered, almost to herself. He turned his head just enough for her to hear him. "Because we're not prey," he said. "We're the ones the galaxy should have run from." The wolves closed in around him, the commander at the front, her face hard but calm. Council ships hovered on the horizon like vultures, preparing to drop another wave. But the wolves didn't look afraid. If anything, there was a kind of grim satisfaction in their eyes. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was a message. As the next dropship descended, the commander's voice rang out low and sharp. "They came for a hunt," she said. "Let's remind them what happens when they hunt us." The night exploded with gunfire and smoke, the frozen valley turning into a battlefield lit by fire and cold light. The girl stood at the center of it all, the weight of her choice pressing down on her, knowing that this was no longer just about her. It was about humanity drawing a line in the snow, a line the council would regret crossing. And above it all, the wolves moved through the dark like the storm itself had chosen a side. The horizon burned in silent waves of fire and smoke, painting the snow in streaks of orange and crimson as council dropships fell from the night sky like wounded predators. The wolves moved through the chaos like shadows given purpose, their black armor streaked with frost and blood, their rifles whispering death with each steady pull of the trigger. The council forces had come with numbers, with confidence, with the belief that fear alone could break a human defense line. But fear didn't work on Terrans. It never had. If anything, fear belonged to those standing against them now. The soldier knelt behind a half-collapsed ridge, scanning the battlefield through his scope. The storm had long since passed, but the cold still bit like a blade. Terran soldiers fought in silence, every movement coordinated, precise, almost surgical. The Council troops were louder, desperate, their discipline crumbling as wave after wave failed to breach the perimeter. He could see it in their body language, the small hesitations, the scattered formations, the way their eyes shifted in panic at every flash of movement in the snow. They'd come here thinking they were the hunters. Now they understood they were prey. He exhaled slowly, his breath a pale ghost in the freezing air. Another Council squad broke through the tree line, fanning out toward the southern flank. He didn't wait for orders. None of them did. He rose from cover, stepped forward into the killing ground, and opened fire with terrifying calm. 3 shots. 3 soldiers down. The wolves to his left shifted like a black tide, cutting off the squad's retreat before they even realized they were surrounded. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. At the edge of the battlefield, the alien girl watched everything unfold, clutching the heavy Terran blanket around her as if it could anchor her to something real. She had seen Council soldiers march before, seen how they overwhelmed enemies with numbers and intimidation. But she had never seen them break. She'd never seen them panic. And yet here they were, breaking apart against a force 1/10 their size. It wasn't because humans had the bigger fleet or the stronger armor. It was because these wolves fought like they were born for this moment. She could see it in their faces. Cold, calm, unshakable. A loud crack split the air as one of the wolves launched a plasma spike into the lead dropship overhead. The explosion bloomed like a dying star, throwing debris across the valley. Council soldiers screamed as the wreckage hit the snow, but the wolves didn't flinch. The commander raised a gloved hand, signaling the next wave of positioning without a single word. They didn't need to shout. They understood one another. Every motion, every glance, was part of a language born out of 1,000 forgotten wars. Another squad tried to flank from the north. They didn't get far. The soldier was already there, moving fast through the smoke, his boots silent even on the crackling snow. One hunter lunged at him with a blade that shimmered faintly blue under the stars, but he sidestepped easily, twisted the attacker's wrist until bones snapped, then buried his knife beneath the armor plates. The alien dropped wordlessly. Another came from behind. The soldier didn't even turn fully. He ducked low, fired once backward, and the body fell with a heavy thud. The girl watched in stunned silence. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like predators who had finally been given permission to hunt. As the wolves closed the net tighter, the commander approached the girl, her voice as sharp as the cold air. "This won't be the last wave," she said flatly. "The Council will keep sending them. They're trying to erase you. And now they'll want to erase us too." The girl swallowed hard. "Then why don't you run?" she asked. "You could leave me here. They'd stop chasing you if I were gone." The commander's gray eyes narrowed. "You still don't get it," she said softly. "They've been chasing us long before you showed up. You just gave them a reason to come out of the dark. And that," she tilted her head toward the burning dropships, "was their mistake." Another distant rumble rolled across the horizon. Bigger engines. Heavier thrusters. The soldier turned toward the sound and narrowed his eyes. This wasn't another strike team. It was a cruiser, an orbital gunship breaking through the upper atmosphere, its silhouette a dark slash against the stars. The Council was escalating. They wanted to end this quickly. The wolves didn't retreat. The commander tapped her comms, and every Terran soldier shifted formation instantly, falling into an arrowhead pattern. "Bring it down," she said, her voice steady. "No panic. No hesitation. Just an order." 2 of the wolves dragged along, heavy case from the dropship and cracked it open to reveal a Terran rail cannon. Sleek, black, and built for one purpose, breaking bigger things. The soldier joined them, locking the massive weapon into its ground mount. The gun was a relic of Earth's early war years, brutal and simple, nothing fancy like the Council's gleaming toys. It didn't need to be fancy. It just needed to kill. The alien girl stumbled closer, her heart pounding against her ribs. "That's a Council cruiser," she whispered. You can't shoot that down from the ground. One of the wolves glanced at her without breaking their rhythm. We don't need to shoot it down, he said calmly. We just need to make it regret landing. The rail cannon roared to life with a low, earth-shaking hum. The commander's voice came through every comm at once. All units, brace. The soldier sighted the cruiser through the targeting scope. His breath slowed. His pulse steadied. He squeezed the trigger. The blast wasn't loud. It was deep, a low thunder that rolled through the valley like the ground itself was cracking open. The slug tore through the air faster than sound, slicing through the cruiser's lower hull like a hot blade through paper. A second later, a blinding bloom of orange split the sky. The cruiser lurched violently, bleeding fire across the stars, its descent uncontrolled. The wolves didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They just shifted positions again, preparing for whatever came next. And something was coming next. The council never backed down after humiliation. But tonight, they weren't facing diplomats or frightened colonists. They were facing wolves. As the fire from the cruiser lit the snow in shades of gold and red, the girl finally understood the truth that the council spent years trying to hide. This was why they feared humans. Not because they were reckless or wild. Because when the galaxy cornered them, they didn't beg. They bared their teeth. The soldier lowered the cannon and walked back toward the tent. His rifle hung against his shoulder, his breath steady despite the ash swirling in the wind. He knelt down in front of the girl, his voice low, almost too quiet to hear over the distant crackle of fire. This isn't over, he said. They'll send more. Bigger fleets. More ships. But now, his eyes hardened. Now they've made this personal. The commander's voice came over the comms, sharp and final. Shadow wolves, prepare for extraction. Priority transport inbound. The council just declared us ghosts. Time to disappear. The wolves began to pack up as quickly as they had arrived. No wasted movement. No looking back. Their ships lifted off the snow like whispers rising into the night. The girl stood at the edge of the tent, staring at the flames across the horizon. She had spent her life believing the council controlled everything. Tonight, that illusion burned with their ships. As she stepped toward the dropship, the soldier glanced back once at the smoldering battlefield. The air was thick with the metallic scent of war. Above, the stars shimmered cold and clear, unaware that the galaxy had just crossed a line it couldn't erase. He spoke softly, not to her, not to anyone, but to the night itself. They thought we'd run. But wolves don't run from hunters. We run at them. The ramp closed behind them with a hiss. Engines roared low and steady as the dropships lifted off into the black. The girl clutched the railing, staring at the world below shrinking beneath them. The council would come. Fleets would follow. The war she'd only whispered about in fear was no longer coming. It had already begun. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity was already moving. Not as prey. Not as rebels. But as predators who had finally been given something worth tearing the galaxy apart for.